The great space station orbited a blue star, its massive rings spinning slowly in the darkness. Ships from across the galaxy had gathered here for the biggest military show of the year. Every alien race wanted to display their newest and most powerful warships. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Resilience. Through the large windows, he could see the other vessels arriving. The Vorthan ships looked like silver arrows shooting through space, leaving bright, blue trails behind them. They moved so fast that human eyes could barely track them. The Zephyrian cruisers were made of some kind of crystal that bent starlight into beautiful rainbows. Even the ugly Krugan battleships looked impressive with their huge guns and thick armor. Then there was his ship. The Resilience looked like someone had built a flying brick. It was big, gray, and covered in thick metal plates. Where other ships had smooth curves, the human battleship had sharp corners and rough edges. Pipes and cables ran along the outside of the hull like veins. It looked more like a factory than a warship. Commander Lisa Hayes walked up to Morrison and handed him a data pad. Her face was tight with anger. "Sir, you need to see this. The alien news networks are having a field day with us." Morrison took the pad and read the translated headlines. Human museum ship joins modern fleet. Earth brings antique to military exercise. Primitive humans still use chemical rockets. They think we're a joke, Hayes said quietly. Lieutenant Dan Cooper looked up from his station. "Sir, the Zephyrian ship just completed their speed test. They hit 70% light speed." Morrison nodded, but said nothing. The Resilience could only reach 20% light speed, and that was pushing their engines to the breaking point. When their turn came for the demonstration, the massive ship moved forward like a wounded elephant. The alien observers barely tried to hide their laughter. Ambassador Vexhai of the Insectoid Collective clicked his bug-like mouthparts together. "Look at that old design," he said to his assistant. "Do the humans still burn fuel to make their ships move? How cute." The mockery got worse during the weapons tests. The Vorthan ships fired beams of pure energy that could cut through asteroids like butter. The Zephyrian vessels created fields of power that crushed targets from the inside out. The Krugan warships launched missiles that could track their targets across entire star systems. The Resilience fired simple metal slugs from magnetic rails. The projectiles were fast and hit hard, but they looked primitive compared to the exotic weapons the other races used. Some of the alien observers actually laughed out loud when they saw the human weapons in action. Admiral Patricia Stone watched from the observation deck as her flagship became the target of jokes across a dozen different species. She had fought hard to get humanity accepted into the Galactic Defense Council. Now she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. High Commander Thrak of the Krugan Empire was a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros. His deep voice rumbled with amusement. "The humans brought an old cargo ship to a military parade. Maybe they should stick to carrying supplies and leave the real fighting to us." What the aliens did not understand was that every part of the Resilience was built exactly the way the humans wanted it. Where the aliens saw old technology, human engineers saw systems that worked every time. Where they saw too much armor, human soldiers saw protection that would keep them alive. Where they saw weak weapons, human warriors saw guns that never broke down. The worst part came during the mock battle exercises. Fast alien fighters zipped around the Resilience like angry wasps around a bear. Their energy weapons left black marks on the human ship's thick hull, but could not punch through the heavy armor. The simulation ended with the Resilience damaged, but still fighting while the alien ships celebrated their easy victory. Ambassador Lyrian of the Star Court was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to glow with its own light. Her voice was smooth and condescending. "Perhaps humanity would be more comfortable in a support role. Leave the real fighting to those of us with more advanced technology." The other alien representatives nodded in agreement. The humans were clearly outclassed by every measure that mattered. Their ships were slow, their weapons were primitive, and their technology was hundreds of years behind everyone else. But Jake Morrison had been in the military for 30 years. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies and defended supply convoys from raiders. He knew that fancy technology meant nothing if it broke down when you needed it most. He had seen beautiful ships become floating coffins when their complex systems failed at the worst possible moment. Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez came up behind Morrison and spoke quietly. "Captain, I know what they're all thinking. But this old girl has something their pretty ships don't have." "What's that, Chief?" "She's built to last. When their fancy weapons stop working and their quantum shields fail, we'll still be here, still fighting." Morrison looked out at the alien fleet with their gleaming hulls and exotic weapons. They were impressive, he had to admit, fast, powerful, and beautiful to look at. But he had learned long ago that the most dangerous opponent was often the one that everyone underestimated. The fleet review ended with humanity assigned to the bottom of every ranking. Slowest ships, weakest weapons, most primitive technology. The Resilience and her sister ships were treated like museum pieces that had somehow wandered into a real military exercise. As the various fleets prepared to return to their home systems, the alien commanders were already making plans that did not include significant human participation. Why would they need slow, outdated ships when they had vessels that could cross star systems in hours and weapons that could destroy planets? Jake Morrison returned to his quarters and sat down at his desk. Tomorrow they would return to Earth, where he would have to explain to his superiors why the galaxy's most advanced civilization saw humanity as barely worthy of notice. But deep in his heart, Morrison knew something that the aliens did not. When the real fighting started, when lives hung in the balance and there was no room for error, the tortoise sometimes beat the hare. Slow and Steady had won more battles throughout human history than anyone cared to count. The aliens could keep their speed and their fancy weapons. Morrison would take reliability, durability, and the stubborn refusal to give up that had carried humanity from cave fires to the stars. He just hoped he would get the chance to prove it. 3 months passed after the embarrassing fleet review. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee on the bridge of the Resilience when the emergency alert came through. The ship's communication system crackled to life with an urgent message from Earth Command. "All vessels report to emergency stations. Priority Alpha alert. The Devourers are moving again." Morrison set down his coffee cup and felt his blood turn cold. Every person in the galaxy knew about the Devourers. They were creatures from the dark spaces between stars who ate entire solar systems and left nothing behind but empty void. For almost 100 years, they had been quiet, sleeping in the far reaches of space. Commander Lisa Hayes rushed onto the bridge, still putting on her uniform jacket. "Sir, we're getting reports from scout ships in the void sectors. Something big is moving out there." The Galactic Defense Council called an emergency meeting within hours. Representatives from dozens of alien species gathered on the Great Space Station, where they had mocked human ships just months before. This time, nobody was laughing. Science Director Karen Webb stood before the assembled aliens, her face pale with worry. She was one of the few humans allowed in these high-level meetings. The holographic display behind her showed star maps and sensor readings that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "Our best estimates show at least 200 Devourer ships," Webb said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Each one is about 5 kilometers long. They have weapons that can break apart matter at the smallest level." Supreme Admiral Crickstall of the Vorthon Navy rose from his seat. His snake-like body moved with fluid grace as he spoke. 200 ships is not so many. Our combined fleets have thousands of vessels. This threat can be handled." "High Commander," Threk nodded his massive head in agreement. "The Krugan Empire alone has 300 battleships. Add the speed of the Vorthon destroyers and the energy weapons of the Zephyrian cruisers, and this becomes a simple military operation." "Admiral," Patricia Stone cleared her throat. "The Resilience and her sister ships are ready to help in whatever way you think is best." A wave of quiet amusement passed through the alien representatives. Ambassador Vexhai clicked his mandibles together in what passed for polite laughter among his insect-like people. "How kind of the humans. Perhaps your sturdy ships could serve as floating repair shops for our damaged vessels." The battle plan that came out of the meeting showed exactly what the aliens thought of human fighting ability. The fast, powerful ships of the various alien fleets would attack the Devourer fleet directly. They would use their superior speed and advanced weapons to destroy the enemy quickly and efficiently. The human ships, including the Resilience, were given support duties far from the main battle. They would protect supply lines and provide backup services while the real warriors did the fighting. Morrison received his orders with quiet acceptance, though Hayes made no effort to hide her anger. "Supply line protection," she muttered, reading through the mission briefing. "They're treating us like a cargo escort service." Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez looked up from his control panel. "Maybe that's not so bad, Commander. Let the fancy ships take the glory. We'll be here when they need us." Lieutenant Dan Cooper had been monitoring the long-range sensors, and his face was troubled. "Sir, I'm picking up some strange readings from the Devourer fleet. The energy signatures don't match what we have in our history files." Morrison frowned. "What kind of strange readings?" "They're bigger than expected, sir, much bigger. And there are more of them. I'm counting at least 400 contacts, not 200 like the intelligence report said." Hayes immediately sent the sensor data to Fleet Command, but the alien admirals dismissed it without serious consideration. They were confident in their own intelligence services and certain that primitive human sensors were simply making mistakes. Communications. Officer Zarthol of the Starcourt Navy spoke during the next fleet briefing, his voice full of condescension. "Human technology is quaint but hardly reliable for accurate military intelligence gathering." As the combined galactic fleet moved toward the battle zone, the human ships found themselves pushed to the back of the formation. The Resilience and her three sister ships, the UES Endurance, UES Determination, and UES Defiance, maintained their assigned patrol routes while the alien fleets prepared for what they expected to be an easy victory. The first signs of trouble came when advanced scout ships failed to report back on schedule. Then long-range communications started having problems with interference. Finally, when the main fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the planned coordinates, they found themselves facing a nightmare. There were not 200 Devourer ships waiting for them. There were over 600. "Impossible," whispered Supreme Admiral Krikstal as his flagship's sensors confirmed what everyone could see with their own eyes. "Our intelligence was completely wrong. The Devourer vessels were unlike anything in the historical records. Previous encounters had described them as ship-like entities, but these were massive living-looking things that seemed to bend space around them. They moved with the grace of predators despite their enormous size, and their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The first attack from the Devourer fleet cut through the front ranks of the Galactic Armada like a hot knife through butter. The elegant Vorthon destroyers, so proud of their speed and ability to dodge, found themselves unable to escape weapons that seemed to warp reality itself. The beautiful Zephyrian cruisers, with their crystal hulls designed to redirect energy, shattered like glass under the assault. Within the first 10 minutes of battle, the Galactic fleet lost over 100 ships. High Commander Thrax's voice boomed across the communication channels, but even his usual confidence was cracking. "Krugen, Battle Group 7 is gone. Repeat, Battle Group 7 has been completely destroyed. We need help immediately." Ambassador Lyrian's Starcourt vessels, with their elegant designs and advanced computer systems, discovered that their sophisticated weapons could not even achieve target locks on enemies that seemed to exist partially outside normal space and time. Her flagship sent out a distress signal just before it vanished into nothingness. Far behind the main battle, Captain Morrison watched the tactical display with growing alarm. The human sensors that the aliens had mocked as primitive were providing a clearer picture of the disaster than anyone wanted to see. The Devourer ships were not just attacking randomly. They were learning, adapting their tactics in real time to counter each species' strengths. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Cooper, his voice steady despite the horror unfolding on the screens. "The main fleet has lost 60% of its strength. They're calling for immediate assistance from all reserve units." Hayes turned to Morrison. "What are your orders, sir?" Morrison stood slowly, his weathered face grim with determination. "Signal the Endurance, Determination, and Defiance. We're moving to engage the enemy." Chief Engineer Rodriguez looked up from his station. "Sir, Command specifically ordered us to stay in position and protect the supply lines." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing dozens of friendly, Contacts winking out of existence every minute. Chief, there won't be any supply lines to protect if there's no fleet left to supply. Besides, those aren't just ships dying out there. Those are our allies. The 4 human battleships began their slow advance toward the main battle zone. Where alien vessels could cross the distance in minutes, the human ships needed nearly an hour to reach the fighting. By the time they arrived, the once mighty galactic fleet was in full retreat, with less than 30% of its original strength still capable of fighting. Supreme Admiral Krixtal's desperate transmission reached the approaching human ships. Human vessels, maintain your distance. These weapons ignore all known defensive systems. Your primitive technology will not fare any better than ours did. Morrison's reply was calm and steady. Acknowledged, Admiral. We're moving to cover your withdrawal. The Devourer ships, drunk on their easy victory over the galaxy's most advanced fleets, turned their attention to what they saw as the final, pathetic remnants of their enemies. 4 slow, outdated human battleships, limping toward them like wounded animals seeking death. They had no idea what they were about to face. The battle that was supposed to be an easy victory had become a complete disaster. The Devourer fleet's new weapons caught every alien species completely off guard. Their reality-warping beams ignored shields like they were made of paper. Their matter-destroying weapons cut through the strongest armor like it was nothing. Their ships moved with impossible speed despite being enormous. Supreme Admiral Krixtal watched in horror as his tactical display showed ship after ship disappearing from the screen. The pride of the Vorthon Navy, the destroyer VNS Swift Strike, simply stopped existing when caught in a Devourer beam. One moment it was there, the next moment there was only empty space and scattered atoms. All units, try evasive pattern Delta 7, he commanded, his voice tight with growing panic. Focus all fire on the lead Devourer vessel. The response was chaos. Ships that had worked perfectly in training found their systems failing under the strange effects of the enemy weapons. The Zephyrian energy-based systems went crazy when exposed to the Devourer's exotic radiation. The Krugan dreadnoughts, built like floating fortresses, discovered that their thick armor provided no protection against weapons that attacked matter at the atomic level. High Commander Thrax's voice echoed across the command frequency, but even his usual confidence was breaking. Krugan Battle Group 7 is destroyed. Repeat, Battle Group 7 has been completely wiped out. We need immediate reinforcement. Ambassador Lyrian's Starcourt vessels, with their beautiful designs and advanced quantum systems, fared no better. Their sophisticated computer-guided weapons could not get targeting locks on enemies that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Her flagship's distress signal was the last thing transmitted, before it too vanished into nothingness. Into the rear of the formation, Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display with growing alarm. The human sensors, dismissed as primitive by their allies, were providing a clearer picture of the battle than anyone wanted to see. The Devourer ships were not just attacking randomly. They were learning, changing their tactics in real time, to counter each species' strengths. Sir, reported Lieutenant Dan Cooper, his voice steady despite the carnage unfolding before them. The main fleet has lost 60% of its strength. They're requesting immediate assistance from all reserve units. Commander Lisa Hayes turned to Morrison. Orders, sir? Morrison stood slowly, his weathered face grim. Signal the endurance, determination, and defiance. We're moving to engage. Sir, interrupted Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez, they specifically ordered us to maintain our position and protect the supply lines. The supply lines won't matter if there's no fleet left to supply, Morrison replied. Besides, those aren't supply ships out there dying, those are our allies. The 4 human battleships began their slow advance toward the main battle zone. Where alien vessels could cross the distance in minutes, the human ships required nearly an hour. By the time they arrived, the galactic fleet was in full retreat, with less than 30% of its original strength remaining. Supreme Admiral Krixtal's transmission to the human ships was desperate. Human vessels, maintain your distance. These weapons ignore all known defensive systems. Your primitive technology won't fare any better than ours. Acknowledged, Admiral, Morrison replied. Calmly, we're moving to cover your withdrawal. What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. The Devourer ships, drunk on their easy victory, turned their attention to what they perceived as the final, pathetic remnants of the galactic fleet. 4 slow, outdated human battleships limping toward them like wounded animals. The first Devourer to engage the Resilience learned that sometimes, old technology has advantages that advanced systems lack. The reality-warping beam that had effortlessly destroyed dozens of alien ships struck the human battleship's thick, layered armor, and something unexpected happened. It stopped. The beam carved deep gouges in the Resilience's hull. Sparks flew from damaged systems throughout the ship. Warning lights flashed red as multiple systems failed, but the vessel remained intact. More importantly, it remained functional. "All batteries open fire," Morrison commanded. The Resilience's response was decidedly old-fashioned. Massive railguns hurled tungsten slugs at tremendous speeds. Missile batteries launched waves of nuclear-tipped warheads. Point defense systems threw up walls of conventional projectiles. Nothing exotic, nothing elegant, just raw, brutal kinetic force. The Devourer vessel, evolved to counter energy weapons and quantum effects, had no special defenses against simple, massive objects moving at tremendous speed. The tungsten slugs punched through its bioorganic hull like bullets through flesh, while the nuclear missiles detonated against its surface in brilliant fireballs. For the first time in the battle, a Devourer ship staggered under the assault. The sight sent shockwaves through both fleets. The surviving alien vessels, which had been fleeing in disorder, slowed their retreat to witness something that their advanced sensors insisted was impossible. "By the void winds," whispered Supreme Admiral, Crixtal watching his tactical display in amazement. "The human ship is actually hurting them." The Devourer fleet, which had been casually pursuing the retreating aliens like predators chasing scattered prey, suddenly focused their attention on the 4 human battleships. What had seemed like easy final kills now represented an actual threat that needed to be eliminated. 6 Devourer vessels converged on the Resilience, their reality-warping weapons lashing out in coordinated strikes. The human battleship's hull began to buckle under the assault, armor plating peeling away like the skin of an orange. But where alien ships had simply ceased to exist under similar punishment, the Resilience stubbornly refused to die. "Hull breach, on deck 7 through 12, reported damage control. We've lost main power to the forward sections." "Engineering, I need everything you can give me," Morrison called out, gripping his command chair as another wave of exotic energy washed over the ship. Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice came back strained but determined. "Switching to backup fusion reactors. We've got maybe 20 minutes of full power before the containment systems fail." Commander Hayes studied the tactical display, her mind racing. "Sir, I'm seeing a pattern in their attack formations. They're not used to opponents who can take this kind of punishment and keep fighting." She was right. The Devourer ships had developed tactics based on their ability to destroy enemies quickly and efficiently. They were clustering together, focusing their fire. But in doing so, they were making themselves vulnerable to the kind of weapons that the humans specialized in, area effect attacks that did not require pinpoint accuracy. "All batteries target the center of their formation," Morrison ordered. "Full spread, nuclear warheads." The Resilience's missile batteries unleashed everything they had. Dozens of nuclear-tipped warheads streaked toward the clustered Devourer ships, followed by waves of conventional explosives and kinetic projectiles. The first few missiles were intercepted by the enemy's defensive systems, but there were simply too many targets for them to stop them all. The nuclear detonations lit up space like miniature suns. The Devourer ships, evolved to resist exotic energy weapons, discovered that raw nuclear fire was something else entirely. 2 of the vessels were crippled immediately, their bioorganic hulls charred and blackened. A third began venting atmosphere and strange fluids into space. The other 3 human battleships had been watching and learning. Captain Steve Miller of the U.S. Endurance had coordinated with his sister ships, and all 4 vessels now began a coordinated assault that their alien allies thought impossible. "This is Miller to all human vessels," came the transmission. "Pattern Alpha 7 sustained bombardment. Let's show these things what happens when you mess with slow and steady." The 4 human battleships formed a box formation, each ship covering the other's vulnerable angles while maintaining continuous fire. Their weapons were simple, their tactics were straightforward, but their execution was flawless. Years of training with limited resources had taught human crews to make every shot count, to maintain their weapons under the worst conditions, and to keep fighting long after more advanced systems would have failed. The surviving alien vessels watched in stunned amazement as the 4 human battleships continued their methodical destruction of the Devourer advance force. Ships that had been objects of ridicule just hours before were now proving to be the most effective weapons in the galaxy. The sight of a Devourer ship actually taking damage sent shockwaves through both fleets. The surviving alien vessels, which had been fleeing in complete panic, slowed their retreat to witness something that their advanced sensors said was impossible. "By the void winds," whispered Supreme Admiral Krixtal, watching his tactical display in complete amazement. "The human ship is actually hurting them." The Devourer fleet, which had been casually chasing the retreating aliens like hunters pursuing scared animals, suddenly focused all their attention on the 4 human battleships. What had seemed like easy final targets now represented a real threat that needed to be destroyed immediately. 6 Devourer vessels moved toward the Resilience, their reality-warping weapons striking out in perfectly timed attacks. The human battleship's thick hull began to bend and crack under the assault, with armor plates peeling away like layers of an onion. But where alien ships had simply disappeared under similar attacks, the Resilience stubbornly refused to die. "Hull damage on deck 7 through 12, reported the damage control officer. "We've lost main power to the forward weapon systems. Engineering, I need everything you can give me," Morrison called out, holding tight to his command chair as another wave of strange energy washed over the ship. Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez's voice came back strained but determined. "Switching to backup fusion reactors now. We've got maybe 20 minutes of full power before the safety systems shut us down." Commander Lisa Hayes studied the tactical display, her mind working fast. "Sir, I'm seeing a pattern in how they attack. They're not used to fighting enemies who can take this much damage and keep shooting back." She was absolutely right. The Devourer ships had developed their fighting methods based on being able to destroy enemies quickly and completely. They were grouping together and focusing all their fire on single targets. But in doing so, they were making themselves perfect targets for the kind of weapons that humans were best at using. "All weapon systems target the center of their group," Morrison ordered. "Full missile spread, nuclear warheads armed." The Resilience's missile batteries fired everything they had. Dozens of nuclear-tipped warheads flew toward the clustered Devourer ships, followed by waves of regular explosives and solid metal projectiles. The first few missiles were shot down by the enemy's defense systems, but there were simply too many incoming weapons for them to stop them all. The nuclear explosions lit up space like tiny suns being born. The Devourer ships, which had evolved to resist exotic energy weapons, discovered that raw nuclear fire was completely different from anything they had faced before. 2 of the vessels were badly damaged immediately, their living hulls burned and blackened. A third began leaking air and strange liquids into the vacuum of space. The other 3 human battleships had been watching the Resilience's attack and learning from it. Captain Steve Miller of the UES Endurance had been talking with his fellow captains, and all 4 ships now began a coordinated attack that their alien allies had thought was impossible. "This is Miller to all human vessels," came the radio transmission. "Attack pattern Alpha 7, continuous bombardment. Let's show these creatures what happens when they pick a fight with humans." The 4 human battleships moved into a box formation, with each ship protecting the weak spots of the others while keeping up steady fire. Their weapons were simple, and their tactics were basic, but their execution was perfect. Years of training with old equipment had taught human crews to make every shot count, to keep their weapons working under the worst conditions, and to keep fighting long after more advanced systems would have broken down. The Devourer ships, frustrated by enemies who refused to die quickly, began making mistakes in their tactics. They spread their attacks across all 4 human vessels instead of focusing on destroying one target at a time. They moved in closer, trying to use their superior speed and maneuverability, but this only made them easier targets for the humans. Area effect weapons. Captain Linda Gray of the UES Determination scored the first confirmed kill when her ship's main railgun battery achieved perfect accuracy on a damaged Devourer vessel. The tungsten slugs, each one weighing several tons and moving at a significant fraction of light speed, tore through the bioorganic ship from front to back. The alien vessel broke apart in a series of explosions and flying debris. First kill. Confirmed for determination, came Gray's voice over the communication system, calm and professional despite having just achieved something that the combined might of the galactic fleet had failed to do. The surviving alien vessels, watching the battle from their retreat positions, stared in complete amazement as the 4 human battleships continued their systematic destruction of the Devourer advance force. Ships that had been objects of mockery and ridicule just hours before were now proving to be the most effective weapons in the galaxy, against an enemy that had seemed completely invincible. High Commander Thrax's transmission reached the human ships just as Captain Morrison was preparing to engage the largest of the remaining Devourer vessels. Human ships, this is Thrax. My people and I owe you a sincere apology, and our deepest respect. Save the apologies for later, Commander, Morrison replied, never taking his eyes off the tactical display showing the massive enemy ship bearing down on them. Right now we could use some help. These things are tough, but they're not impossible to kill. The tide of battle began to change as the surviving alien vessels, inspired by the humans' unexpected success, slowly regrouped and started to rejoin the fight. But their approach was completely different now. Instead of trying to rely on their individual technological advantages, they began supporting the human battleships, using their speed and maneuverability to drive the Devourer ships into the areas where the human weapons were most effective. Supreme Admiral Krikstal's remaining Vorthan destroyers used their superior speed to conduct quick hit-and-run attacks. They were not trying to destroy the enemy ships, but rather to damage their engines and steering systems. This left the massive Devourer vessels vulnerable to the sustained bombardments that the human ships were so good at delivering. The few surviving Zephyrian cruisers discovered that while their energy weapons were useless against the Devourer hulls, they could disrupt the exotic radiation that the enemy ships used for targeting and navigation. This forced the Devourers to rely on more basic targeting methods, which played directly into human strengths. Even High Commander Thrax's damaged Krugan dreadnoughts found a useful role, using their massive size and thick armor to act as moving shields, protecting the human battleships during the time it took them to reload their weapons. Captain Morrison watched this unprecedented cooperation between species with a mixture of pride and grim satisfaction. For the first time in galactic history, all the different races were working together as a unified force, and it was the supposedly primitive humans who were leading the charge. Commander Hayes, signal all Allied vessels, Morrison said, watching, as another Devourer ship exploded under concentrated fire from 3 human battleships. We're going to finish this fight the human way, with patience, determination, and more firepower than they can handle. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the fighting began, the combined galactic fleet had hope. The slow, mocked human battleships had become the galaxy's salvation, and everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The aliens had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating others, and the Devourers were about to learn what happened when they faced an enemy that simply refused to give up. The tide of battle continued to turn as the surviving alien vessels, inspired by the humans' success, regrouped and rejoined the fight. But their approach was completely different now. Instead of relying on their individual technological advantages, they began supporting the human battleships, using their speed and maneuverability to herd the Devourer ships into the areas where the human weapons worked best. Supreme Admiral Krikstal's remaining Vorthan destroyers used their superior speed to conduct hit-and-run attacks. They were not trying to destroy the enemy ships, but rather to damage their engines and steering systems. This left the massive Devourer vessels slow and clumsy, perfect targets for the sustained bombardments that the human ships were so good at delivering. The few surviving Zephyrian cruisers discovered that while their energy weapons were useless against the Devourer hulls, they could jam the exotic radiation that the enemy ships used for targeting and navigation. This forced the Devourers to rely on basic targeting methods, which played directly into human strengths. Even High Commander Thrax's battered Krugan dreadnoughts found a useful role, using their massive bulk and thick armor to act as mobile shields, protecting the human battleships during their reloading cycles. Captain Jake Morrison watched this unprecedented cooperation with a mixture of pride and grim satisfaction. Commander Hayes, signal all Allied vessels. We're going to finish this the human way, with patience, persistence, and overwhelming firepower. The final phase of the battle became a perfect example of human military thinking. Where other species favored quick, decisive battles, humans excelled at long, grinding warfare. The 4 human battleships established overlapping fields of fire and began the systematic destruction of the remaining Devourer fleet. Each enemy vessel was engaged by multiple human ships at the same time, ensuring that even if one battleship was temporarily disabled, the others could continue the assault. The humans rotated their attacks, allowing damaged vessels to withdraw for emergency repairs while fresh ships took their place in the line of battle. The Devourer ships, realizing that their initial advantage had been completely neutralized, attempted to withdraw from the battle, but the human battleships, for all their lack of speed, had been positioned perfectly to cut off the enemy's escape routes. What had seemed like slow, clumsy positioning was revealed to be strategic brilliance. The humans had trapped the entire Devourer advance force. "This is Captain Miller to all vessels," came the transmission from the Endurance. "Enemy formation is attempting to scatter. Execute Containment Protocol 7. The 4 human battleships spread out into a wide formation, their overlapping weapon ranges creating a cage of destruction that the Devourer ships could not escape. Any enemy vessel that tried to break through the perimeter was met with concentrated fire from multiple human ships, while their alien allies harassed and drove the remaining Devourers back into the kill zone. The battle's conclusion was inevitable, but not quick. The human crews, trained for extended battles, maintained steady, accurate fire for over 6 hours. One by one, the Devourer ships were reduced to drifting wreckage. The few that attempted to surrender found that human ships were equipped with boarding parties, something that most alien species had abandoned in favor of more technological solutions. Chief Security Officer Janet Walsh led the boarding team onto the first captured Devourer vessel, her Marines equipped with simple but effective kinetic weapons and thick, layered armor. Where alien boarding parties had failed because the Devourer ship's strange environment disrupted their advanced equipment, human Marines with traditional weapons and analog systems succeeded. "Secure the bridge," Walsh ordered, her voice calm and professional as her team moved through corridors that seemed to bend space around them. Standard containment protocols for unknown hostiles. The information gathered from the captured ships revealed the full scope of the threat that the galaxy had faced. The Devourer fleet was not just a raiding force, it was the advance guard of a massive invasion fleet that had been preparing for decades. If they had succeeded in destroying or scattering the galactic defense forces, nothing would have stood between them and the populated systems of the galaxy. Admiral Patricia Stone's voice reached the Resilience as the last of the Devourer ships was finally destroyed. "Outstanding work, Captain Morrison. The entire galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." Morrison looked around his battle-damaged bridge, at his exhausted crew who had just saved countless billions of lives, and allowed himself a small smile. "Just doing our job, Admiral. Though I think our next fleet review might go a little differently." Commander Hayes, nursing a minor injury from a console explosion hours earlier, could not help but laugh. "Sir, do you think they'll still want to assign us to supply line protection?" "I doubt it, Commander," Morrison replied, watching as the surviving alien ships moved to assist with rescue operations and salvage. "Something tells me they're going to want us right up front next time." The slow human battleships, objects of mockery and ridicule just days before, had become the galaxy's salvation. The species that had dismissed human technology as primitive now competed for the privilege of serving alongside human crews. The Resilience and her sister ships were no longer laughingstocks. They were legends. In the aftermath of the battle, as rescue ships worked to save survivors and recover the wounded, the alien representatives approached Admiral Stone with a very different attitude than they had shown before. "Admiral," said Supreme Admiral Crickstall, his serpentine form bowing respectfully, The Vorthan Navy requests permission to study human ship design and tactics. We have much to learn from your people. High Commander Thrak nodded his massive head, in agreement. The Krugan Empire wishes to propose a formal military alliance with Earth. Your ships and crews have proven themselves beyond any doubt. Even Ambassador Lyrian, who had been so condescending before, spoke with genuine respect. The Star Court offers our deepest apologies for our previous attitude. We would be honored to have human ships serve alongside ours in future operations. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed warfare itself. The alien species had spent centuries developing faster ships, more exotic weapons, and more advanced technology. They had forgotten the basic principles that humans had never abandoned: reliability, durability, and the stubborn refusal to give up. Chief, Engineer Rodriguez summed it up perfectly as he surveyed the damage to the Resilience. You know what, Captain? Sometimes the best technology is the kind that just works every single time, no matter what you throw at it. Morrison nodded in agreement. The aliens built ships to impress. We built ships to survive. When it really mattered, survival won. And in the deep void between the stars, the main Devourer invasion fleet received word of their advance forces' complete destruction at the hands of creatures they had never bothered to study or understand. For the first time in their long, predatory existence, the Devourers felt something they had never experienced before: fear. The slow human ships were coming, and they brought with them something more dangerous than any exotic weapon or advanced technology. They brought determination, courage, and the absolute refusal to surrender. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how the humans liked it.